So a brand new kind of term of the 100 that we're into now, IPL owners and various different owners, tech conglomerates, you name it. We had a 100 draft today. A lot of talking points in it. There was a lot of money thrown around. We've got an even bigger gap between the men's and the women's pay, and I'm sure we'll get onto that eventually. Harry Brook's been banned from the IPL. The WPL is heading towards a final, and a pretty exciting one, and a couple of more points. I'm joined with Andrew today. Andrew, why was there no stream for the 100 draft? I mean, I love watching stuff like this. The IPL auction is like appointment TV for me. But no, I have to watch a wisdom stream of two blokes on Zoom.
Oh, great to be back on, Charlie. And I I woke up with, honestly, I described on a TikTok I did that drafts and auctions are like my Christmas. And I was so excited. And I put up a TikTok about, and in my comments section, a Manchester shout out to the Manchester Originals fan account just commented, "Oh, there's no live stream," and I was like, "Oh, maybe they've got it wrong as well." But then a couple of Google searches later, and yeah, nothing at all. So a live blog to announce the different players, and yeah, and caps off to Wisdom. Apparently, they only found out the day before, and they did put together a pretty good offering for yeah, two blokes and hopefully I reckon probably some backroom staff putting together like a pretty good offering. But yeah, with all the new money and the new 100, it definitely felt like a bit of a transition and a bit of a lackluster effort, really.
I know, and you look at the IPL auction and they've flown everyone out to Saudi and everyone's got special suits made that they're all matching. And you think there was even people to host it. I mean, Charles Dagnall was there. You had Sam Billings there. Was Lydia Greenway there as well?
I think potentially there was Paige Schofield, who was,
Yeah.
we'll get on to talk about how kind of her draft went. But yeah, there was definitely some kind of budget for it. But I just think it was, I like it. Yeah, I think Charles Dagnall, I loved him doing it a couple of years ago when he kind of hits the Sky Sports screen and he's just trying to rapid speak as the draft picks come out, and they can come out fast as well. Like, is how they kind of get released to the public information. But
Yeah,
he's done a brilliant job at it. So
I think we saw. I think it was after they got through like the big picks of the women's draft. All of a sudden, they just lumped them all out together, and it was like, oh, okay, that's a lot of players that has come out already. And I do, just before we get into the women's draft, it is slightly related, but there was one name on there, and it came out with that big lump at the very end. It was the very last pick of the draft for the London Spirit. Rebecca Tyson was picked up for 10k. I have actually played with her. So we played for the same club, Leverstock Green. We played threes and fours together. So when I saw the name, I saw that she got picked up for Hampshire last year, and she's been picked up with for the London Spirit this year. So I can now finally say that in a game I have outbowled a player that plays in the 100.
It's taken three odd years. Well, I have to say I'm pretty across the women's game, and I'm a limited knowledge about Rebecca Tyson, but it's exciting when a player that potentially isn't as well picked up, because as last year we had Tilly Coleman. She was picked up, I think, as the last pick, or definitely in the last section, and she was a bit of an unknown. And Southern Brave didn't do that well, but she came on as a 16-year-old and absolutely lit up the tournament. So even when it gets down to those lower picks and stuff, and maybe like the kind of the top band selections are done, and maybe all the really massive media talking points, there still can be some really interesting stories to come out of that. So who knows? I'm about to say, I wish her all the best. We've still got quite a long season to go before the 100, and I'm sure she'll get some valuable experience if she's in and around that Hampshire setup.
Yes, so let's start off women's 100 draft. It started off with Birmingham Phoenix having the top pick, and they tried to pick three other players: Paige Schofield, Sophia Dunkley, Heather Knight, until they eventually ended up with Georgia Vole. Good pick for the Birmingham Phoenix?
I think an interesting pick. When Georgia Vole has had a really great domestic season in the WPL, and she's done really well in the kind of domestic circuit. She's still kind of breaking into that Australia team as hard as it is. She has played she's played some games in that Australia team. She also went over, she was so she played well in the WBBL. Apologies if I got that wrong. But she got pulled into the WPL. She wasn't in the kind of auction process. She didn't get signed up. But she got pulled in last minute and she hit a 99 in one of her kind of first couple of games. So I'm going to say a little bit of a recency bias there, but she's a brilliant talent and she's a brilliant player. I'm interested to see that they didn't go for Elisa Healy. I mean, they already had a couple of different keeping options, but I think if Elisa Healy's in that draft, I'm potentially picking it with the amount of experience that she has, whether that there's considerations around her kind of playing schedule and whether there's kind of rumor mills of how much she would actually be used in the 100 and kind of her, I'm not exactly sure. I think the gamesmanship of right to matching and trying to go for all those players was probably a pretty kind of wise move to burn right to matches because they could have maybe come into play later down the list. I think it probably didn't make much of a difference. I think Birmingham would have been pretty confident that all those free players would have been Paige Schofield would have gone to Invincibles, Dunkley would have gone to Welsh Fire, and London Spirit aren't going to lose their captain. So it was pretty obvious gamesmanship, and I think they wouldn't have been unhappy with any of those options. But yeah, so Georgia Vole, good pick, a bit unproven maybe, yet still kind of young and kind of exciting, but massive day for her, and kind of a decent pick, but a little bit surprising, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, she played. There was a few games that she played in the Ashes, wasn't there?
Yes, so she
and
was mainly in the kind of I think the T20s. She was across them, and
she took an absolute screamer as well, didn't she?
Mm.
If I remember rightly, thinking back to it, I've tried to wipe that tour from my memory already, but I vaguely remember her flying in the air and taking an absolute screamer of a catch.
There aren't that many exciting things from this winter, to be fair. So we've got to grab onto the things, even if it was an Australian do it. You've got to be cricket neutral sometimes. So I think unfortunately, she was signed up for the Lancashire Thunder last year and unfortunately got an injury when she'd just come over. So that was, we didn't get to see potentially what talent she was in our domestic system. I'm not sure if she's coming back, and it might be a chance that she plays in the domestic system, the first year of the new domestic system as well this year. So that's yet to be seen, but definitely an interesting talent and an exciting talent for the future.
In terms of we'll stick with the rest of the Birmingham Phoenix. Emma Lamb for 50k, Georgia Boyce for 16, Mary Kelly for 12.5, and Bethan Ellis.
I think we're going to start with the Emma Lamb pick, and Emma Lamb has historically struggled in the 100, and I think the thing is, in the women's draft, domestic batters go at a premium. Like if you're a domestic batter, you most of the time are going to get picked up in fairly high slots, and Emma Lamb has. I think that kind of reflects it. Then you look at the kind of the people below the list of who the Birmingham Phoenix would have gone for, and it gets pretty slim pickings pretty quickly. So I think Emma Lamb would have been there. They kind of look at her record, and she's had some incredible Charlotte Edwards tournaments back in, I can't remember exactly what year, but when the Thunder actually reached the finals day of the Charlotte Edwards, she was crucial in that campaign. So she has the talent. It just doesn't seem to have, and she has the kind of, she has played for England as well. So she has that a little bit of an international experience. It just hasn't ever come off in the 100, really. She has, in the first season, she had a couple of really kind of flashy, exciting innings. And then in the last two, she's struggled. She moved around the order a bit. So, and I've seen, I was there when she scored the first ever T20 100 in a women's domestic game at Old Trafford. And so she has talent, and she's going to be, hopefully, I hope to see that a move of team and kind of maybe a move of setup reignites that in the 100.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Some of the lower picks, I have to admit, I'm not too, I'm not 100% sure of how they're going to go. I mean, women's cricket isn't my specialist subject, I have to admit. It's more on the men's side. In terms of the lower picks, have you got anything
I
on
think
them? Anything exciting?
my opinion would be Callis and Boyce are fairly similar picks, trying to
Okay.
bolster their batting lineup as well. But I would say they're pretty same. I'd say looking at this, looking at the Birmingham Phoenix team as a whole, you look at it and you think you've got a lot of strong options, and obviously the Vol, and I'm guessing Amy Jones will open with Vol, and then you go into their middle order. You do have a pretty sizable. I think they'll expect um, Charles Pavley as well, who's who's kind of a bowling all rounder. I think they'll expect to kind of her to be in that middle order as their kind of left hand option. But then when you look at it, there are kind of, and you get down to the bottom end, Marie Kelly, Stair Callis, and Georgia Boyce are pretty similar players in
Mm.
terms of they are all decent domestic players, and I'd say Maria Kelly has probably not been picked up by the and not been retained by the Northern Superchargers because she did struggle a bit last year. So that's probably, I'm glad to see her going back to kind of her home setup in Birmingham. So that's an exciting story for sure. But they do have, it does strike me as quite a couple of players that are fairly similar, so a bit one dimensional. But I think a lot of cricket to happen between now and then. So
Yeah,
it'll be
exactly.
interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Whether Emma Lamb has a really decent domestic tournament and domestic season leading into this 100 is yet to be seen.
And especially with the change in structures
Mm,
that the women's game now has, obviously being directly tied to the counties, whether that makes a difference, whether the improved facilities and the improved coaching that they might now get, that they might not have had before, whether that then makes an improvement, that would be something to see. And I personally think, in terms of the 100, it will grow through the women's game a lot quicker than it will grow through the men's game.
mm.
And I think they're definitely seeing bringing the women into the county structure and using that as a pathway to the 100 is the way to go. Because I've been, for me, the women's 100 is what, the second best competition.
I think definitely the WPL is on its heels, but in terms of kind of, you look at facilities, you look at the kind of, we obviously we kind of can talk on the kind of pay disparity between the men's. I
Mm.
think there are a lot of factors around that, and sometimes it is kind of talked about as a pretty simple pay disparity. I think the men's are trying to compete with other franchise competitions. Now, the kind of how the women's circuit works is that the big tournaments pretty much have their own space.
Mm.
So there isn't actually that much kind of elbow barging. Whereas in the men's, you're making sure that you're trying to stop players from going over playing in the CPL, playing in Major League Cricket. I think Major League Cricket and the 100 have kind of worked out a bit of an agreement to not clash that much. Whether that continues, we don't know. So I think that is probably why the kind of men's have skyrocketed a bit in price. It is obviously a problem, and obviously you don't want to see that gap absolutely skyrocketing again in the next couple of years. You do want the women's to catch up, but I think that is one of the explainers, is because of the competition for men's players. But the women's 100, I think, is growing strength on strength each year. You're getting players more big ground experience, big kind of getting these big audiences, which I think, we'll talk back to the kind of the first game of the 100. You're giving these players a real platform to perform and play as they deserve, and it's shining a spotlight on women's sport, and it's brilliant. So there definitely are, that kind of pay disparity is problematic, I'm not going to say, but I
Mm.
do think that can foresee it happening, that there are a lot of other factors around that, and I would like to hope that the kind of, with the influx of money and funding and stuff, that is kind of slowly creeping up and stuff year on year.
Yeah, I think the problem with the big, because it was 125k to 65k, and now it's
Mm,
gone up to 200k for the men's.
mm,
I think it was a case of that 125k wasn't enticing the biggest names in cricket to the
mm,
men's 100, whereas
mm,
the 65k was enticing the biggest women's players into the
mm,
100. So if you haven't got that IPL money yet, so while we haven't got it, let's try and entice the men's players, and we've still got all of the biggest women's players.
mm.
So now we've got 2 games a day with the best players in the world for the men's game and the women's game. And I think that's fair, but the women's game does need to catch up, and it needs to catch up pretty quickly in terms of I'm not saying that they should necessarily be paid exactly the same,
Mm.
but the pay gap should definitely be less. It should probably be more similar to what it was at the start when it was 100k and 65k. So if the men are now on 200k, you'd probably want to see that around 150k for the women at the top bracket.
We'll definitely see that progression year on
Mm.
year. And I think also that money, it's looking at how that money then can be invested into the kind of the women's domestic system and stuff. I know we've gone completely off kilter. I'll try kind of pull us
Mm.
back. But I think I would like to see that money being invested in the domestic system. And I think there is a real opportunity now to kind of have that pathway for younger players.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. Should we do the other team that had some big changes? Southern
Mm,
Brave, Sophie Devine, Chloe Tryon, Maddie
mm,
Villiers, Josie Groves, and Phoebe Graham for 10k towards the end. Sophie Devine, Chloe Tryon, probably the two big names in there. Maddie Villiers, I really like Maddie Villiers. I always whenever I see her in the 100, she always seems to do really well.
mm,
16k seemed low. As someone who doesn't necessarily keep up to date with every domestic women's game,
mm.
that seemed like a bit of a bargain there.
Manny Villiers at that price is an incredible bargain. I'd say looking at the domestic batting that they had last year, you kind of Bouchier didn't have the best of tournaments,
Mm.
and then your averages kind of they really struggled. So picking up a domestic batter who also is a off spinning all rounder at that value, I think is a brilliant take from them. Then you've obviously got the quality of Divine. She's still kind of going to bolster that batting lineup. I think it was also you've got Wolfart in there. It's looking like a much stronger team than I feel like they were last year.
Mm.
And I think that Villiers pick just shores up that domestic kind of batting lineup where looking at their kind of okay, you don't expect kind of Boucher and to have that off year, and you kind of expect that probably to be bolstered a bit, but it just adds another domestic batter that is going to put in handy innings. And so I think that was a really, really great pick. They're kind of the obviously not happening in the sorry. Obviously not happening in the draft, happening before the Wolfart pick. I think that's a really clever move.
Yeah.
Gutted to see her going from originals, but I think when we get onto the originals, I'll kind of explain why I think that was crucial for us to make that pick, or the originals to make that pick. But I think, yeah, looking at that Brave, they look like a decent unit now. I think Divine adds a lot to that team. I think she would. I think I'm not surprised with her moving over there. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they kind of regroup after having a rip for Southern Brave and for Charlotte Edwards, a really poor performance last
Mm.
year. So kind of going from the heights of kind of winning it in year two, being in the final in both those years, to then kind of being around the bottom half the table, it's not where Southern Brave want to be. And I think they've had a really good draft to kind of replace, to make sure that they're kind of in the kind of running for that.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I think obviously with Danny White Hodge and Maya Boucher, they can both be very kind of hot and cold cricketers.
Mm,
Of when they're on, they're on. But when they're not necessarily on, you have a problem like you did in the last 100, where you just weren't really getting any proper top order runs out of them. And they can struggle. That's kind of where it felt like it kind of went wrong for the Southern Brave. I mean, they've got Lauren Bell, obviously one of the best bowlers that England have at the moment. So I think that they look a lot better than they do last year. If they can get everyone in form at the right time, then they look like a pretty good squad. We'll go on to the Manchester Originals now.
mm.
DeAndre Dottin, Tareen Smale, Ella, I'm going to struggle with that surname, and
Ellen
Alice. That's it. There we go. Alice Monaghan were their picks. So just the four
Mm,
picks. The other two obviously had five.
mm.
I thought Dottin was a really, really clever pickup for the Originals. I thought that's exactly what they needed. Just that bit of firepower. Obviously, she's now come back into playing. Is she retired yet, or is she still playing international cricket?
So there was kind of and obviously it's struggled to talk about West Indian cricketers and then the West Indian Cricket Board, but there was
Mm.
a lot of toing and froing between the player and the kind of board. And then so Deandra actually retired and was just playing franchise cricket. and has kind of been in a bit of the kind of the wilderness. She didn't get a WBBL gig on one of the years that she was retired, and then she got a WPL gig, but then there was a bit of friction there, and then she didn't play in the WPL. So a bit of a kind of upping and downing, but then, which I was really glad to see, because in the midst of that, she had played for Lancashire, she had played for the Manchester Originals, and I'd worked her. She's an absolute character. She can hit the ball so far. There in terms of out and out six hitters, she can strike the ball cleaner than I think I've seen anyone in the women's game, and it's the power that she has is incredible. So getting that with a bit more consistency, and she did it on a number of occasions for the Manchester Originals. Now, then she did come back into that West Indies team, who made a really good run in the Women's World Cup. So I was really excited to see her back in that women's team in the West Indies. And then she played in the WPL, had a decent tournament. She was back bowling again, which was really great to see. So then when I saw this lineup, and I kind of looking for Manchester Indians, probably at that third pick, needing a bit of power, I was really excited to see them pick up Deandra Dottin, because, as I said, six hitting is her bread and butter. And the way that they've constructed this team, I think, with getting Amelia Kerr, brilliant early signing before the draft, getting her in there with her kind of captaincy experience, her leg spin, lethal, and just her batting. It's incredible that I had to lift her batting in the last of those three, but she is one of the most exciting all-rounders. She's come off the back of winning a World Cup with New Zealand. Incredible feat in the way the women's landscape is set up, with England and Australia, being so dominant. New Zealand winning that World Cup and playing so well, and her leadership in that, incredible. And then going into the other picks, I think Seren Smale is, with that, keeping that Lancashire connection, really great, exciting young player. And then kind of we go into Ella McCacken. She's a exciting player from down south. She's kind of been at I'm pretty sure she was at the Welsh Fire last year, and she kind of played a bit. So I think I'm not sure if she's going to be in the starting 11, but a decent kind of domestic batter. And then you've obviously got Alice Monaghan, who is a gun fielder as well. And she's been moved over from what was the kind of Hampshire Southern Vipers. She's now at the Surrey team now. So interesting to see how kind of she is like lightning in the field, and a decent kind of bat and ball, kind of medium pace, and will probably bat in the kind of lower order. And it'll be interesting to see how she fits into that team. But overall, as going into it looks like a decent team. Maybe seems a little bit of a question mark in terms of kind of, you've got Mahika Gore, and you've got Alice Monaghan and Catherine Bryce as the kind of, and then Dottin as well as the kind of the seamers. But
Laurel Filer's in there as well, isn't she?
So a young and exciting seam attack, I'd say. You've got the kind of the pace and the swing of Filer and Mahika. So I'm excited to see how that goes. So I would say that's a pretty raw pace attack, but the experience that you have in the spin with Amelia Kerr, Sophie Eccleston, and you've also got a really good domestic spinner in Daniel Gregory. Yeah, I'm very happy with how that's going. I haven't even mentioned Fee Morris, who is another kind of really good batting all-rounder. And I say batting all-rounder, she's just as good with her off spin. So as it goes, I know it's so easy to say this like after the draft, and kind of like, because we've got so much cricket to be played before the actual tournament. I'm pretty confident with Manchester Region how they've set up this team to have a decent run in this year's tournament.
And also, the thing with Manchester Originals is that they have the cheat code of having 20 balls of Sophie Eccleston that is almost unplayable half the time. So, and you know that she'll pick up 1 or 2 wickets and go for half a run a ball, and you'll be fine. There's not much difference in between there. So, yeah, no, I like the Originals. I thought that the Dottin pick was a really good one. Probably who they needed. We'll move on to the Trent Rockets. They had 3 picks: Jodie Grucock, Emma Jones, and Ellie
Frauchold, yeah. So Ellie moves back. Ellie moves over to Trent Rockets. So it's kind of bittersweet, because she's a kind of proud proud Lancashire player, so she'll kind of. But I could see that happening with Beth Mooney being in that originals team and kind of them not needing massive wicket keeping depth. But I hope Ellie's going to do really well in that Trent Rockets team. Massive win for Jodie Grucott. Really exciting young domestic leg spinner. Also really quality with the bat. So really excited to see where she goes. Emma Jones as well. I think that's a great pick. She's a good young quick to watch. And then obviously Trent Rockets, I think they look like a strong team as well. They're thereabouts. You've got the big names of kind of Gardner, Nat Brunt, who we're going to talk about later when we talk about the WPL, and Alana King. So I still think they're going to be a pretty decent offering.
Yeah, that looks like that. I'm looking at the top three players, the two in the 65k and the one in the 50k of Nat Brunt, Ash Gardner, and Alana King. I mean, there's not many other players that you'd rather pick in the world at the moment, is there?
Massively. Like they're exciting, explosive players, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of balance that with your domestic talent as well. So it's hard because after a draft you can like look at a number of teams, and it's very kind of it's right up until the actual tournament when you definitely concrete and know that all these players are going to play, that you kind of can start to kind of see who's going to actually perform well, or who's kind of you have a bit more of a feel, especially if you've kind of kept up with domestic cricket, who's coming in and hot, who's coming in cold. So it's hard because like you definitely look at, and especially looking at the women's game, you can look at all these names and you'd be like, this is going to be an incredible team. But there's still, as I said earlier, a lot of cricket to be played. But the Rockets look like a really strong team.
Moving on to the Northern Superchargers, just the three picks: Grace Potts, Lucy Higham, and Ella Claridge. Just the three picks they had. Obviously, one 16k, one 12.5, and one 10k.
Not a lot to do really for the for the Supergiants, and for a very easy draft day. But important picks as well. They've got their three overseas and their Australian overseas that I think were real bankers for them last year. So roll it around, and I think from looking at last year's tournament, a couple of games sway their way, and they're into those final spots. So I think pretty clever to keep it pretty similar. They have kind of quite a solid unit, and so it was all about improving that, bringing Higham back, who's pretty reliable off spinner, and then I think where they were kind of picking and who was available at that time, Potts was the best option, and I think she's a kind of another really reliable and decent young bowler in the kind of English in and around the English setup. So. And she's recently moved over to Lancashire actually, so she's getting a bit more north from kind of when she was down at Central Sparks. So it'll be interesting to see where she fits in a pretty seam packed unit when you've got Ballinger, you've got Alison Richard as David Richards, you've also got Kate Cross and Annabelle Sutherland. So whether Potts plays, it's probably questionable, but she still is a decent seamer, and she kind of gives a bit different to that seamer's hat. As well as Ella Claridge, at that point, it's working out who they needed to pick up kind of batting depth. So it was pretty much who was the best option available, and I think Ella Claridge is someone who's going strength to strength in that kind of Blaze team.
Morally, are we still happy that Kate Cross is playing in Yorkshire? Are we still doing? Are we still okay with this?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was in the draft room when we did put her back into the draft and did not expect Northern Superchargers to pick her up. To be fair, I mean, it does sting a bit, but at the time, I think it was the right decision for the originals to make. It was a tough decision because it was a gamble. It was a gamble, and the kind of the thought pattern. She's talked about this as well. The thought pattern was, we picked up Wolfart at 1 and get a quality strong batter, and then we most likely pick her up at 2. Unfortunately, she wasn't available at 2. So I think from a marketing point of view, it stung, but I think at the time, decision making, it was the right decision to make. It's something that I don't love to see, but she's played really well in that Superchargers team, so I can't really kind of hold it against her.
No. Oval Invincibles, they obviously picked up Paige Schofield as a right to match. Phoebe Franklin and is it Kaylee Moore?
Yes, Kaylee Moore. Yeah, so pretty much another team that didn't have a ton of things to do really in terms of just bolstering kind of all-round attack kind of thing. Phoebe Franklin is someone who is kind of domestically batting wise going from strength to strength. She's a really decent bowler, and her bat, she's kind of, whenever we were kind of preparing for matches against the Southeast Stars, now she would be playing for Surrey. I remember kind of thinking like, right, okay, she's going to be more like the lower end of that batting spectrum. But the last couple of years, she's definitely put some real effort into her batting, and she's become more and more effective, and her numbers have shown it. So really decent. I think she moves over from Birmingham Phoenix, so a decent pick at that level. And Killian Moore has kind of Killian Moore is a similar. She's a really decent spinner, and she's kind of moved around a couple of different hundreds team actually, because in actual fact, when you get down to potentially the where was she picked at, the 16 band
12 and a half, I think.
and a half. When you get back down to those picks, and then you kind of are looking at who is available, she does a really, really solid option. And so whether she plays in a team that have spinners like Amanda J. Wellington, Alice Capsey, just looking down, and Sophia Smale, so whether she actually makes it into playing 11, I'm not too sure. But in actual fact, as a decent squad option, as someone to be kind of in and around that squad, very, very good pick at that level, I think.
Yeah, I think it looks like a really solid team, the Invincibles. I mean,
Mm.
so I think the Rockets, Superchargers, Invincible Fire, and the Spirit didn't really have a lot to do.
No,
Um,
they did the massive move of getting in Meg Lanning over from the London Spirit after the successful. She's someone who's going from strength to strength, seeing after international retirement. I
mm,
think she was down at one point to play for the Rockets, and then pulled out last minute for kind of on and around her retirement to give herself kind of a breather from the game, which I
yeah,
100% support, because she has done from that to then coming back and playing in domestic leagues and been playing incredibly in the WPL and then in the 100 last year. Like really decent performances. So interesting to see her move across London to really bolster up this Invincibles team.
yeah. No, it looks like a good team. In terms of the Welsh Fire, they obviously had the right to match of Sophia Dunkley. They picked up Katie George and Katie Levick. Sophia Dunkley, no real surprise there that she went back to the Welsh Fire. And they've obviously got the likes of Hayley Matthews, which I think who is probably one of the most all-round cricketers in the women's game at the moment. There isn't too many that you'd pick in front of her. Um, Looks like a decent side.
I think the pick of Katie Levick at that spot as well.
I
Really
thought
great.
that seemed really low for her.
Yeah, probably just. I think it's probably where the draft kind of it's hard because sometimes where you pick players isn't a kind of a necessarily. And it sounds really really harsh, but it is about, as I said earlier in this talk, kind of domestic batters go at a massive premium, and
Mm.
then kind of potentially when it goes to the later rounds, you do pick up some really quality kind of bowlers, and who are kind of Kate Levick is very much just a bowler. So I think sometimes they can drop down a bit. But Katie Levick, that will be a massive steal for the Welsh Fire, because I'm about to say, looking at it, she's the sixth most wicket taker in the 100. She loves bowling in the 100. She has an economy of 6.7. So they've really, I wouldn't be surprised, and they kind of still are in and around those kind of like top spots. The Welsh Fire really struggled the first couple of seasons, both teams. But last year, with their kind of being just grasped away from winning, and then with a pick like that, I think is a really clever pick, real smart pick to pick her up at that point. And I think she's going to do really well for them, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they look like a really good side. I,
Mm,
I kind of, with my limited knowledge of women's cricket, of basically it's the women's 100, bit of the WPL, bit of the WBBL, and then international games. That's
mm,
kind of my women's cricket knowledge. So
mm,
if I know who you are and it's 16K or below, then that's a
mm.
bargain. That's how
Yeah.
I look at it. So Katie Levick is a pretty big bargain. Another one at 16K, who I definitely know who it is for the London Spirit, Izzy Wong, falls down to 16K.
See, Izzy Wong is an interesting case because she exploded onto the scene, and she had some really, she kind of like was just spraying all over the place. She bowled fast. And I think she kind of in the last she had got picked up by the Mumbai Indians in the WPL, played for them. I think bowled really well in that first season and got WBBL signings for the Sydney Thunder. And she can hit the ball as well. And then the kind of last season, her career a bit stalled. She went on a loan move to the Western Storm. Now I think that loan move has been made permanent. I'm not 100% sure on that, but she definitely, there was kind of a bit of kind of movement and stuff. And I think interesting to see. I hope to see that she can a bit more recapture kind of, because the last season, I'm not even sure if she played in 100 potentially. So struggles with that. But then I was kind of looking at her kind of career, and she's only 22. Like, she is still very young. So I really hope, and so there's still a lot of talent. And I think when you have players who kind of, especially maybe quick bowlers, who burst onto the scene, flash brightly, and then maybe are still working out their action a bit, are still working out, especially with the women's game and how it's changed with professionalism coming in, that sometimes is kind of, for some players, it's taken a little bit more time to kind of get used to that and stuff. So I don't know Izzy personally, but I hope to see her, because she's kind of exciting player, and I hope to see her kind of playing well in domestic cricket, bowling well, and also she can hit a long ball as well. So I hope to see her batting well. So I think it's a little bit of a risky pick, but then there's a lot of talent there, and there's definitely a lot to potentially work with there. So her moving down to London, as I said, a little bit with the kind of the Emma Lamb pick, it might be a bit of change of setup, hopefully a kind of a change of circumstances for a very exciting talent.
Yeah, it's a very weird career because, as you said, she really burst off and almost became one of the biggest names in women's cricket overnight. And she had a really good WPL in, I think it was the inaugural season. It was the first season of the WPL. And basically, I can't remember who she was playing for now, but basically, what it was Mumbai, and basically won them the WPL in the first year. Performed really well in the final. And then it came to the 2023 Ashes, and it was almost like she just wasn't fancied by that England team. And I don't know if that knocked her confidence a little bit, or that the England team couldn't trust her, because, as you said, she is a little bit wayward. She's quick, but she's excited at the same time. Little bit of an issue with some of the fast bowlers that the men have got at the moment. And then it seemed to get gradually worse from there. So, as you said, hopefully a bit of a change of scenery, because even going into the kind of marketing around the 100 last year, Izzy Wong was a really big name for the Birmingham Phoenix of marketing the thing, because she's someone that does grab attention. She's not necessarily a household name, but in terms of what the people that have been brought into cricket from the 100 will know who Izzy Wong is. And as a London Spirit fan, I think it's going to be great to have her. I'm really looking forward to having her next year. In terms of the other business they did, they had the right to match on Heather Knight. That was quite obvious that they were going to do that. And then obviously Rebecca Tyson in the 10K mark. I'd love to tell you lots about her, but I haven't seen her play since she was 13. So
well, we'll hope for the best and move on to the men's then.
Yes. In terms of, if you had to pick a side who's going to win it, who would you go for?
I've got to go with the Originals. I back them as a former employee, and proud about to say, as someone who lives in Manchester and very proud of living in Manchester. So love Emirates Old Trafford, and I think that as squads go, and I've said this every time when we're going into the 100, but this looks like the well-rounded squad that the Originals have just been trying to work out over the last couple of years. So very excited to go, and I would be a bit biased probably and go for the Originals. Second pick. If I'm not going to go biased, I'm trying to be kind of even. I think some people are probably going to hate me for this, but I think the Superchargers have a real good bet. I think they were kind of unlucky to miss out on it last year on the finals, but I think having not much movement in the team and then kind of being able to kind of build on a second year, I think they could be my second pick.
I think I'm going to go with the Rockets.
Fair. It's
I
It's
think
with those top three.
the three big players that they've got.
Mm.
Not even that bothered about who they've got. Just send those three out and they'll be absolutely fine. That's going to be my pick. I'd love the Spirit to go back to back. As a Spirit fan, it's not because the men have been useless for the last few years, so it would be nice to see the women go back to back, but not 100% sure. In terms of the men's 100, we'll start with the London Spirit. They signed Jamie Smith outside of the draft. And in the draft, they took Jamie Overton for 200k, David Warner for 120k, Luke Wood 63k, Ashton Turner for 52, Jaffa Chohan for 41.5, and 31k for Wayne Madsen to round it out. Jamie Overton, after the winter that he's had, felt like a bit of a push at 200k, but it's a little bit like we said that domestic batters in the women's game have a premium on them. Fast bowling all-rounders that are domestic talents have a premium on it. So I kind of get where they're coming from. So they've gone with JV Overton as their 200k. It's the David Warner pick for 120k that hurts me deeply to my soul as a London Spirit fan. I cannot support a team that has this man in it. I can't do it. Please don't make me do it.
You've got they've picked up, if David Warner and Kane Williamson open together, they've picked up the the kind of retro Sunrisers outfit from maybe about 4 years ago, maybe in the IPL. So, and I think it'll be interesting to see how those two, where they kind of, I think they've got to put them both in the kind of opening spots, really, like in terms of trying to work out where they bat them in 100 balls. The Kane Williamson one was an interesting one. Seeing that he kind of hadn't been picked up in the IPL, still very prominent international talent, but yeah, it's I can imagine as a very opinionated man like yourself when it comes to Ashes cricket, having David Warner in your domestic team is a tough one to swallow.
It hurts. I've never wanted my own team to be 0-1 at the start of a game so much in my life. The Kane Williamson one is weird. It feels like that he was picked up for Middlesex and then just kind of came to the Spirit because he had nothing else to do for the month of August. I can't see him playing the Metro Bank One Day Cup, so that's probably why he's in there. I don't think he's a good T20 player personally. I think we've seen that he bats too slow in every other franchise competition he plays. He obviously signed up for the PSL instead because he didn't get picked up in the IPL. I like Luke Wood. I think he's a good option. I think the seam bowling for the London Spirit of Worrell, Gleeson, Stone, and Wood look like a really good setup. There's a lot of new ball bowling there, and Gleeson can bowl well at the back end of an innings. Prove that in the SA20
overs. Sorry, Wood can do some decent overs at the back end of that innings as well. So that'll be interesting to see where they kind of use him. To be honest,
yeah. Ashton Turner you needed someone in the middle order, and Jaffa Chohan is a really exciting young leg spinner, and there's not many of them in the English game, and to pick him up for 41.5k seemed pretty good. And I think Wayne Madsen was just a bit of a joke pick towards the end. I mean, why not?
You get the experience in there. I think Jaffa Chohan is exciting to see. He played a couple of games for the Sydney Sixers in the Big Bash when he got selected out there. And yeah, he had a really good season with Yorkshire, the kind of last season. So exciting to see him getting picked up, and hopefully he gets some kind of games in that kind of unit.
Yeah, and also a bit of a homecoming for him. I think he was part of
Middlesex boy.
He played with Atherton's son. Who Josh DeCaries, when they were growing up, and then didn't get a contract with Middlesex, got picked up by Yorkshire and has improved. I wish we kept him. I think the London Spirit look like a pretty good side. Hopefully they do better than they did last year. I have no idea where they're going to fit in all the batters. I did a bit of a predicted lineup, and I've got Ollie Pope opening the batting at the moment, so I don't know quite well how that's going to go. Hopefully in that kind of 31k wildcard picks, we can pick an opener. Let's move on to Manchester Originals. They picked up Noor Ahmed, for 200k, Ratchet Ravinger for 120k, Lewis Gregory for 120k, Ben McKinney for 78.5k, and George Garton for 63k. In terms of teams having a draft, they have literally picked all of my favourite players.
I think the Nur Ahmed pick was the worst kept secret in the whole draft. I think I talked to a number of different people, and they said, "Yeah, Nur Ahmed with the Lucknow connection is pretty much nailed on. You need a mystery spinner in there, and he had a decent SA20, and it has had a decent winter, and so and kind of it seemed like it was always going to happen. That measured up with the Heinrich Klaassen, the Brasinger. It's some really class names in there, and someone who lives in Manchester. I'm pretty exciting. Do you know much about Ben McKinney?
I,
I
I
do not
do.
myself.
So he is a opening batsman for Durham. Um, Tall, bats like Trescothic, really exciting. He scored 100 when he went away with the Lions this year. He had Swan ranting about how good he is. He's ready for Test cricket now. Do not be surprised if he is in the Ashes tour later this year. He's
Wow.
that good. And
Oh,
he's
really?
only 20.
That much of a kind of hype around him then? Wow.
Yeah, he's a really, really exciting player. And at the start of the county championship, I'm very excited to see him and how he goes. It's a lot of money. And there was actually a point where they said that he went for 120k on the blog, and someone got it wrong.
Nice.
And he,
well done, 100 blog. Thanks for that.
yeah, I think they said that he was picked instead of Zach Crawley at one point, but it was actually Zach Crawley that the Northern Superchargers picked.
Right. Okay.
Bit of a weird one. I think it looks like a really good team. I mean, I've got them with a top six of Butler, Salt, Matty Hurst, Ratchet Ravindra, Klaassen, and then Lewis Gregory. That's a really scary top six.
I think Matty Hurst is a very exciting talent. I'd love to see another year of him in the 100. Struggled when he went in the Big Bash. I don't think he necessarily kind of had a great winter out there, but really exciting, young, youthful kind of Lancashire talent as well, which I think is always really key to when we talk about franchise tournaments, is that keeping that kind of connection with your kind of strong domestic unit that have played together and stuff. And I think sometimes that can be kind of overlooked, but with kind of those certain different kind of Lancashire players in that, it does look like a really strong unit.
Yeah, I think they look like a really good side. Welsh Fire, they basically got rid of their whole team last year. They were left with
They
just
love a reset, don't they?
It's because they've been shit every single time they've played. It's just a waste of time. I'm surprised they didn't sell for a packet of crisps and a fiver to an IPL team rather than the millions that they actually got. They were left with just Chris Wokes as their bowler, and they didn't have anything else. They obviously brought Steve Smith in. He fills up one of the other 200k spots. They picked up David Payne for 120k. Walter for 78.5, Riley Meredith for 63, Chris Green for 63, Saif Zaib for 52, Josh Holt for 41.5, and Mason Crane to round it out for 31k. A lot of bowlers in there. They needed them. David Payne obviously had a fantastic T20 blast for Gloucestershire last season. I was surprised that he hasn't had another look at England. He was that good. Also, always seems to get franchise gigs. I'm not 100% sure what he does.
I think just being that kind of tall Paul presence.
Is it the nickname that gets him the gigs? Because they love him in Australia, don't they? He's become some sort of cult hero.
The and I think sometimes franchises do love a player that is maybe, especially like a Big Bash franchise. I think sometimes taking a bit of a punt on a player that isn't going to be taken away by international or another franchise, really, and say to them, right, could you actually we're going to pay you and you're going to play our whole tournament. And I think Tall Paul gave that for when he was in that kind of Brisbane Heat winning side. And I think that was really key. So I think his left art, and he has that kind of presence about him for and has that kind of cult status for a player that's never played international cricket. He does have a bit of a name around the franchise circuit. And so, yeah, I've seen him take some incredible diving catches. And I was there when he hit us. I remember we'd been knocked out of the 100. So I was in a bit of a glum mood. So I went and sat in the stands, and my brother came up and she's like, right, cheer up. The men still have a chance to get into the kind of final. It was pretty much a shootout between the Oval Invincibles and the Manchester Originals, and it got tighter and tighter and tighter. And then basically, Tor Paul stepped up, hit this massive six, and it kept going, And I stood up, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's going, it's going!" And then my brother went, "It's going to be caught." Will Jack settles underneath it, catches it, juggles it, drops it over the boundary for six. Cricketing moments in my life. Old Trafford went nuts. Honestly, it was one of I put it in my top 10 for cricketing moments I've seen at a live game. Then kind of him and Madsen knocked it around. So I think he's an exciting domestic player for sure. And I think he offers kind of your left-handed batter, your left-handed seamer. So I think those is why he probably comes in terms of those unique skill sets. So yeah, I think that's why sometimes he gets more picks than potentially that's why I think he sometimes gets picked up.
Yeah, Riley Meredith, been round enough to know what Riley Meredith does at this point. Chris Green, I'm really excited for. I think Chris Green at 63k is just a really good pick. It knows how to play T20 cricket with bat and ball. I think he's a really good player. I know he had like a really short stint at the Trent Rockets, I think it was last year.
Because he
had
was
like
he was at Lancashire pretty much. So he was at Lancashire, and then I think a couple of injuries went in and around, and then basically he got then put in for 2 games. He'll be at Lancashire. He's now signed, I think, a 2-year deal with kind of the club to play T20 cricket. And I think probably that comes with Welsh Fire seeing that 2-year deal and thinking, well, he did a decent stint for the Rockets when he had that kind of 2-game stretch. I think he took it like a blinding catch at one point. So I think that might have been, and yeah, I think he's brilliant T20 player. So I think it'll be interesting, and he's a good pick down in that kind of that area for getting an overseas.
Josh Holt, an interesting one. Obviously got his test call up last year. It looked like way too raw. Like even I know he had a relatively good blast for Leicestershire last year. Was a bit of a surprising pickup, but I guess again it's just that left armerness. But I mean, with already having David Payne, was there not another option around? I don't want to seem too down on Josh Holt, but he doesn't quite seem to be the finished product yet. I guess for 41.5k, why not take a swing? He might have a great blast and can carry on that form. Kind of makes sense. And then Mason Crane at 31k is an absolute steal.
It's interesting to see where Mason Crane's kind of career's gone from the kind of days when he was taking AB de Villiers' wicket in T20 cricket. So it's been a bit of an up and down trajectory for him. So I'm glad it's a good option at the kind of that 31k slot, really.
Yeah, I think he looks a lot better. Last season was the best I've seen him look in a while, and I thought that that was a really good pickup at 31k. Onto the Trent Rockets, they spent 200k on David Willey, which seemed like a hell of a lot of money.
It's a bold pick. It's a big pick.
I know we talked about Jamie Overton being that kind of premium for seam bowling all rounders. And to be fair, I mean, Willie can bat everywhere. He's even opened a little bit for Northants in T20 cricket. I doubt he will be in this side because they have a lot of top order batting. They also picked up Lockie Ferguson, Max Holden, George Lindy, who had a really good SA20 and some really good T20s for South Africa before the Champions Trophy. Adam Hose and Rian Ahmed fell to 52k. There was a lot of people talking that he could have gone for 200 in this.
I saw a couple of mock drafts saying that he could have gone for 200. So I'm interested to see what the kind of maybe the dynamics of why he did slide, because I think he was fairly high up the list for or was he? I can't remember where his band was last year for the Southern Brave. But yeah, interesting to see how kind of much it did dropped. And I think draft dynamics, as we've talked about, doesn't necessarily always reflect the actual kind of talent and how important that player will be. So I do think Rian Ahmed is still going to be quite an important player in that Trent Rockets team. It just is not reflected by the draft at all.
Yeah, massively. There's not a load of spin in there, with the exception of Calvin Harrison, can turn his arm over. They've also got Sam Cook, John Turner, both good white ball bowlers. The George Lindy one is really exciting for me. I thought he should have played the Champions Trophy for South Africa. I thought he was that good. And then Max Holden had a pretty good 100 for the originals. Was it last year or the year before that he was pretty good? I know he played both years for him.
Might have been the year before, because last year for the men's was a pretty down year. For I think it was last year. No, year before that he had a pretty explosive year. So interesting to see how then he moves away. So so a little bit of an exodus from the kind of originals core that has been there in the last couple of years. Kind of Tall Paul moving on, got Wayne Madsen moving on. You've got Max Holden moving. So yeah, a bit of a kind of shuffle around with that kind of originals team and kind of seeing players move elsewhere.
Yeah, the Adam Hose one was the one that I didn't quite get. They have a lot of top order batting already in Root, Bantam, Tom Alsop, Sam Hain, Max Holden, Stoinis. All you think will fit in that top six somewhere. I just don't necessarily know where Adam Hose fits into that. Someone that's obviously batted more in the top order than he hasn't. So I was surprised that they picked him up. But I mean, David Willey for 200k was still the most ridiculous pick of the draft.
Yeah, it's like I think it was interesting because I think a good couple of years ago, I think it was Morris got picked up in the IPL auction for an insane amount of money, and the kind of thing was trying to work out. It was like, is he? I think Jared Kimber did a really interesting piece on, is he worth to like the kind of insane amount that he was at, or is he worth that much to the Rajasthan Royals? So obviously Trent Rockets have felt that they've looked at the options, they've looked at the draft, and I'm not saying it's necessarily the right pick, but to them, David Willey's worth 200k and he's going to get paid 200k to be there. I think it's interesting to kind of, obviously he's just playing franchise cricket. Kind of, the England door has now been shut. It's interesting to see like whether he still kind of, if like he develops, if he delivers on that kind of 200k kind of packet, I guess. But as you said, seeming all rounders who can hit at the death go at a premium in this men's draft, like Jamie Overton, and the fact that add that into that he's kind of left arm. You can see, you can build a picture of why there are a couple of values there. But yeah, it's a bold pick.
Yeah, I guess that there's also a thought of, because it's not necessarily an auction and you have to pick someone in that 200k mark, why not pick a player that you want and you don't even have to worry that they're not going to come up again? No other team is going to spend 200k on David Willey, but if we spend 200k, okay, what do we do? Do we spend 200k on Lockie Ferguson and hope that David Willey's still there at 120k? I guess it makes sense in that way. I think they've got a really good side. I think they look really well rounded. I hope Root plays a lot of the 100, because I'd like to see Root in the T20 squad for next year's T20 World Cup, if he can do it. So yeah, I'd like to see him opening the batting, or at least at 3 in that Trent Rockets side. Northern Superchargers, they just had the 3 picks. Zach Crawley at 120k, Michael Pepper at 52k, and Dawid Malan at 52k. Obviously, wanted some top order batting, and I still have no idea who's going to open the batting for him.
No clue. Looking at that, whether you have a kind of a 3-way shootout between Milan. Obviously, Milan. Oh,
You could go Lawrence, Milan, Pepper, or Crawley.
Oh god, I'd say it's a proper Mexican standoff. Who loses out there? I think you probably got to go Zach Crawley, just in terms of kind of giving him as much time at the top of the order as possible. And in kind of T20 cricket, when he's played at franchises and when he's played at domestic level, I've always seen him as a kind of opener. I don't know if he fits lower down really. So I think, yeah, you probably, I think Zach Crawley's the kind of nailed on opener. With those other options, it's definitely I think probably Dan Lawrence slides down, and then you have the two left-handers, and it kind of like can Potts bat in the middle order as well. No, sorry, not Potts. Pepper.
Possibly. The way I did it, I had Crawley, Lawrence / Milan opening, Pepper at 3, Brook 4, Miller 5, and then Graham Clark
I think
6.
I've accidentally called Zach Crawley a left-hander there, so slight kind of moment lapse of judgment. But yeah, I think you've got to go Milan. Zach Crawley as the opening partner. Sorry, did you have that as, or did you
I
have
had Lawrence.
had Lawrence instead?
I think Lawrence had a really good year for the Spirit last year,
Mm.
on a difficult pitch at Lords. So maybe that's the way I'd go. It depends how Milan goes in the Blast, probably.
Mm.
A lot of this is going to be done by Blast performances. I I kind of saw why Zach Crawley got up. I was almost surprised he didn't fall in price.
Mm.
Um, I can understand why he didn't go for 200k. Could you have got him at 78.5? He probably wasn't going to drop to 52. So I guess you had to pick him up when you did. I don't know. He looked awful in the SA20. He looked so bad. And he has had some good T20. And I mean, you go back to when he played for the Perth Scorchers a couple of years ago in the BBL.
Mm.
He had a really good BBL and looked really good at doing it. But recent form has just been terrible. I guess, again, how he goes in the test matches will probably decide on how he's playing and if he's in any form going into that 100. So could be a real hit and miss. But at least they've got some options to and Brook and David Miller isn't bad to back you up at 4 and 5 if you do struggle at the top.
Massively. They've got that finishing power of both of them. And in terms of when you look down, kind of like Brian Cast can smash a ball as well. Kind of Mitch Shartner, we've seen him kind of hit some late order runs. So I think even Ben Dorshis can hit a long ball. He has done it for a couple of times for the Sixers. So I think, yeah, so the obviously the question mark over Crawley and Milan, and see how well their kind of run up to the 100 goes. But then the kind of the power of Harry Brook and David Miller batting together, that is a scary partnership potentially. So yeah, they do have like those exciting options in that kind of low order that kind of balancing out the question marks in the top.
Yeah, okay. Birmingham Phoenix, they had the least amount of work to do on draft night. They just have 2 picks, both at 41.5k, of Harry Moore and Tom Helm. A very odd way that they've set up their team. So their three overseas are Bolt, Milne, and Southey. So 3 Kiwi fast bowlers, which seems odd because you have so many domestic fast bowlers in England. It's kind of what we do. And then there's a lot of middle order all rounders in Benny Howe, Dan Mousley, Bethel, Livingston, and then Duckett and Smead at the top. I think they're a really good team. Just the way that they've got to the team seems really odd.
Yeah, when you think of definitely, I'd agree with that kind of point of kind of English seam versus and how you use your overseas picks. I think it's an interesting technique, and you think whether they looked at that auction and they've obviously felt they obviously didn't need to sign anyone because they just re-signed them all. So where they saw kind of availability and didn't see maybe kind of that kind of slot of Bolt obviously being a very good talent, and they thought, right, well, let's go with what we kind of already have already. I think, yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's like some of the kind of who they do go for, like kind of lower down the slots. It doesn't seem to be kind of I don't know, not a lot of kind of West kind of side or kind of question mark picks, just a lot of kind of solid cricketers, I guess.
Mm.
I think there's no real kind of looking at all those names. There's no one who jumps out of me who could be a real shock if they don't kind of perform well in their domestic. It's interesting to see that Will Smead has re-signed a Somerset contract on a multi-format deal in the last couple of weeks. So he will be getting more volume of cricket throughout the summer going into this tournament, and obviously won't be playing 50 over cricket. So that will be interesting to see how that affects his form, because he was previously just on a white ball deal, and I think that can some. I think it will be interesting because he didn't seem to kind of pick up those franchise deals and then kind of looked at, and I probably maybe was kind of talked to by kind of coaching staff and stuff and said, well, if you're not going to be in franchise deals and stuff, you might as well play white ball cricket and get a volume of cricket up. So I
Mm.
mean, that's a kind of a story kind of around one of their players that was interesting me in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and obviously he scored the first ever 100 century as well. I think he's a real talent, and I'm so glad that he's going to be playing red ball cricket. And it probably has something to do with how England play Test cricket now as well. It probably
Mm.
comes into it. Possibly he thinks that before I'm not going to make it into a Test squad. Now I might be able to because they're looking for attacking batters. I'm excited. I'm excited to see how he goes for Somerset this year. I think he is a really good pick.
Mm.
But I mean, Birmingham Phoenix, their team hasn't really changed from last year. I think
Yeah.
even one of their I'm pretty sure Tom Helm, who was one of their picks, played for him last year as well.
Mm.
So they've basically just got the same team. Southern Brave, they have one 200k pick of Bracewell, which again another interesting pick. Probably, when there's a tournament just before a draft or an auction,
Mm.
and whoever played well is always in for a payday. It was a
Mm.
little bit like when there was an IPL draft, there was an IPL auction about a month after the T23 World Cup, and all of a sudden there was Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood. They were all going for big money because they just performed well. So that's probably why Bracewell's got 200k. Reece
Mm.
Topley fell to 52, which I thought was a pretty good steal, and Jordan Thompson bought 41.5k.
Mm.
Seems a bit too much for Bracewell though.
I think it is interesting because he has been getting that. He got a top slot in the PSL as well. So even before that kind of Champions Trophy success, his value has been kind of floating up up and around. But looking at that team and looking at like what they needed, probably because that they're probably needing, and I think it's a similar thing to the David Willey kind of argument in terms of like a team looking at what do we need and what are we going to pay the most money for. So I think that probably comes into the argument of needing that kind of economical all rounder, and probably the kind of he's off spin, isn't it? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for kind of second, I thought it was left arm kind of orthodox. So, but off. So yeah, so I think it maybe is a little bit much, but I think they looking at the rest of their teams, they needed that spinning all round. Well, they needed spin to say the least. They were crying out for spin. If you look down that team, I think they're gonna definitely be having to look for some spinners in that wild card. Only having Danny Briggs as well. So bit of a is James Cole a spinner?
I don't think so.
No, I didn't. I think so. Yeah. So looking at the team, very seam heavy, which is interesting. Seems like a lot of seamers.
Yeah, and also the very hit and miss of no idea what you're getting from Archer, whether he's going to be fit or not. That would worry me, or England just completely shutting down before the 100. I could see that happening to see if he's going to be ready for the Ashes. Vince, he's going to score your runs. Chris Jordan is another year older. I know it's Chris Jordan and he always seems to perform and you should never count him out of anything, but getting on a bit now. Same with Tyman Mills, getting on a bit now. Faf is 60, I think.
Not
Craig
needing to fact check that.
Craig Overton's not young anymore. So there's some older players in there.
Did they
And
need to get Topley with that with all those seamers already? Was Reece Topley a need in that Southern Brave team? Wouldn't you potentially look at a kind of I'm interested where
Rian Ahmed. Rian
yeah,
Ahmed was
why
available for that pick when Reece Topley was up.
that is going to be. I think I'd like to remember this point and kind of go back to it when we're at the kind of the 100 because I think that's interesting that you don't retain your exciting young domestic leg spinner and you go for another seamer who when I looked at some mock drafts and Reece Topley was fairly high on Manchester Originals list and I was kind of talking to a couple of people and I was like I'm not sure if he should be that high in terms of and seeing him selected by the Southern Brave team is a bit interesting when Rian Ahmed is available at that slot and then has been kind of picked up by a rival. I don't know if I think that's the smartest bit of business there.
Yeah, and when they're lacking spin, they could. That team looks like it needs another spinner.
Mm,
I mean, nothing against Danny Briggs, but he's not setting the world alight.
mm,
Whereas Rian Ahmed probably could, if it all works out for him. I think there's a few people that are worried about him now.
mm,
Of why is he not getting gigs? Why is he not playing for England? Why is he not? I think this county season's going to be really interesting for him,
mm,
of how he goes. But him falling to 52k and then them picking Reece Topley when they just didn't need another seamer. They've got Archer, Jordan, Mills, who are Jordan Thompson they picked up obviously after him, Overton. They just didn't need another. They just didn't need another seamer. So
it just
I
yeah.
get I get it that you want to pick the best player, and he could have been the best player at 52k. But when you
Mm.
look at your team, did you need him? I'm not 100% sure. Um,
Yeah, they'll definitely be hunting for some wildcard picks for spinners, but I think they should go back to back with wildcard picks for spinners. But yeah, it's interesting that I think just you don't have a much of a point of difference between Michael Bracewell and obviously Danny Briggs. Obviously, you've got two bowlers you can spin it both ways. You can two bowlers who spin it different ways, but it's not necessarily mystery spin. It's not. Yeah, I don't agree with that pick really. So it'd be interesting to see how they kind of pick up in the wildcards. I think I can imagine if you're a kind of domestic spinner and you have a decent blast, likely are and you don't get picked by someone else, Southern Brave will be kind of screaming out for you.
hmm. All right, let's finish off with the Oval Invincibles.
Mm,
A little bit of pre-draft business that they had was Rashid Khan that they picked up for 120k. Obviously, with the Mumbai Indians franchise, they managed to kind of get that pick. And then at 63k, they got Berendorf. 41.5, they got Jordan Clark. And at 31k, they got Miles Hammond. I'm really surprised they didn't try and pick up a opening batsman. As
mm.
much as I love Moae, I'm not 100% sure if he's ready yet.
Do you think there's still a bit more development to come?
Yes.
Mm,
I thought that's the. I mean, this Oval Invincibles team looks ridiculous. It's got two of the players that you could say could be the next England white ball captain, in Sam Curran and Sam Billings.
mm,
Um, that was the only place that I think they're lacking. Very, very exciting. I'm really excited, and every time I see him play, he looks really good. But I just
mm.
not. If I was trying to win a franchise competition, would I want him going in as my opening batsman? Probably not.
Hmm. It's definitely an interesting point. So, who in out of those players, who are you picking to open at the moment? Him,
And Jax
and Jax. And then Cox is coming in that middle order. Yeah,
at 3.
yeah. I think yeah. How many years? He's had a couple of years of blast experience, or maybe one
I
year of
think
peak player.
I think he's had 2. I
Mm,
think he's had 2 now, and he played in the 100 for the first time last year and struggled.
mm. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's probably another thing when they were looking at like wildcard picks. It's interesting when you say like a player like McKinney going at like such a high valuing for the Manchester Originals, whether that was whether he was maybe on their list and
Mm.
had to kind of pivot to thinking about Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting point of, and actually you've got the connection, the Mumbai Indians connection already being very strong there with the Rashid Khan move.
Yeah, I mean, they still look like a really good team.
Mm.
They're captained really well by Billings.
Mhm.
As much as it pains me to say that I like the team the other side of the river,
Mm.
um, I, going to be a decent side, especially with Rashid Khan. I mean, Rashid Khan's one of the best white ball bowlers in the world, and you plug Rashid Khan into a team that won it last year.
Mm. Dangerous, isn't it?
They're gonna be difficult to do. I really hope that Will Jacks has a good tournament because
Mm.
I feel like um, he's missed out on a couple of opportunities now. I thought he should have been in the England squad more than he has been, and yeah, I hope he does well.
Mm.
In terms of who's going to win it, look at those squads. Who do you reckon's got the
Mm.
strongest squad?
I think if I'm looking at, I'm not going to be terrible and just go Manchester Originals straight off the bat. I think it has to be, even though we talked about them having those who's going to be that open, I do fancy that Northern Superchargers team, which I
Mm.
think they're kind of the second year of captaincy for Brooks and kind of Miller. But then I think probably I'm going to kind of yo-yo myself. I still think plugging that kind of Rashid Khan into that team that is already really successful, even with the kind of question mark over that open, I still think Invincibles are going to be thereabouts.
I'm going to take the originals then. Perfect.
Fair.
I can't get over that top
Yeah.
six. That
No,
top six
it's
of Noor Ahmed is going to be unbelievable.
we're probably going to look back on this, and I'm going to regret being trying to be a bit more neutral for the for the second draft.
So that is the 100 draft pretty much summed up pretty well. We've gone through all the picks. Something else that's been happening in cricket, the WPL has been on. What are we in now? Third season of the
We're in the
WPL?
third edition. I think it's just been going from strength to strength, really. I
Mm.
think you've kind of the massive teams of Delhi Capitals and Mumbai Indians have dominated again. I think seeing if we're looking at the kind of the IPL investment, you've got that like the big names. If you're an IPL fan and you're looking at the WPL, you have the big names of Mumbai Indians, Delhi Capitals, and RCB, and they have kind of been thereabouts all the years. And then you've got the two other teams, the Gujarat Giants and you've got the UP Warriors. So the way it's kind of shaping up, we had the playoff today, and the Gujarat Giants came up against the Mumbai Indians and trying to improve on a record which wasn't too favorable. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to do any better. The Mumbai Indians have now gone 7 matches playing across the 3 seasons, 7 matches against the Gujarat Giants, and they completed a 7th win against the Gujarat Giants. So a really dominant display of hitting from the Mumbai Indians. I think before I named the two other players, you got to mention Harmanpreet Kaur. I think she had a strike rate of 300 at the back end. She went in with a massive kind of lease in this game. And the kind of two players that set up was Hayley Matthews and Natsiva Brunt, two big names that we talked about earlier in the women's kind of 100 draft. Partnership 133. They set themselves up really well for this final. Have you been watching much of the tournament? Have you been kind of keeping in touch with it? We've had a lot of tournament cricket in this kind of spell, and I think it's been a bit hard because it's been up against the Champions Trophy.
Yeah, I mean, because all my focus was pretty much on the Champions Trophy, and when it got to the end of the Champions Trophy, I was a little bit cricketed out.
Yeah,
So I kind of, and also, so I watched the WPL. I pretty much every game for the first 2 years, because kind of no other cricket on, and I obviously really enjoy it as well. But because the Champions Trophy's been on, and I think it's probably similar for a lot of cricket fans, of that took priority because it was kind of on at the same time as well. It did clash with the games. It wasn't as if they were finishing earlier. It was kind of at the end of the start of the WPL games was kind of when it was pushing towards the end of the Champions Trophy game. So I haven't watched as much as I wanted to. I've seen a few games. I keep seeing that Natsiva Brunt is looking incredible. I mean, I'm just looking at the stats now. 9 innings. She's averaging 70 with a strike rate of 156.
Insane, like 550 plus scores, and she just goes kind of from strength. She's just reliable, and
Mhm.
that's why that she kind of in that Trent Rockets team when we were talking about the draft. There's no chance that you're putting Natsima Brunt back into a draft because any team is kind of like snapping her up. And I think she's been in that Mumbai setup for kind of 3 years. There's no chance that she'd go back into that auction these days. And if you look at that Mumbai team as well, they've got the two highest wicket takers in Hayley Matthews, who it's amazing to think back to that initial draft, that initial auction, that Hayley Matthews actually wasn't auctioned in the first round. It came to the second round when it came to the speed auction, and she was picked up. But she's done incredible kind of year on year in this Mumbai franchise. So she's taken 17 wickets so far in this tournament at the time of recording. And Amelia Kerr has taken 16 wickets. I think that kind of sums up why I'm so excited that the Manchester Originals kind of didn't wait for her to go in the draft and had an early signing. So very, very kind of exciting, talented Mumbai team. But Mumbai haven't been in the final every single year. But the team that has been in the final every single year is the Delhi Capitals. They've gone 3 years and 3 final losses. So it's kind of, oh no, sorry, they've gone two years.
2 years. Yeah.
2 years. Apologies about that. So the Delhi Capitals have been in the final every single year. They lost to Mumbai in the first year, and in the second they lost to RCB. I feel like a part of me is just like, he's got to be three times lucky, really.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of going back to Hayley Matthews, I mean, to be the leading wicket taker and the third highest run scorer in a competition with this much talent just shows how good she is. I mean, the Caribbean Cricket podcast that I really like what they do over there. They are
Great.
always pushing for Hayley Matthews to play for the men's side. And do you know what? I don't disagree because I think she improves them quite considerably.
Oh, what an amazing scoop that would be.
Yeah, the only things that upsets me is that she still bowls in a hat. Don't like the bowling in the hat.
Very traditionalist cricketer there.
Yeah, no, it feels wrong. Sunglasses I can live with. The hat I can't do it.
I'm interested, if the hat was backwards, would that help?
I think I
Or would
think
that make it
would.
worse?
No, I think that's cool then because she's from the Caribbean. If anyone else does it though, it's then uncle. I think I have that. In terms of crowds and stuff like that, have they all? I presume India. It's always pretty good, isn't it?
I think it's just been developing. I think we had a couple more grounds this season, and the fact that the WPL moves around, and I think their development strategy is really quite clever. Started off strong, just with 2 grounds in the first year, and then I think we're up to 5 off the top of my head, not too sure, but it does move around, which is brilliant because it's now kind of been. They've had RCB games at the Chenaswamy. I think they played a couple of games in Lucknow as well. So as well as kind of the hubs like Mumbai and Delhi, they're kind of spreading that. And women's cricket in India is just going from strength to strength. And you can see that by some really good, even not by the teams that had kind of made it to the finals, some incredible kind of young Indian domestic performances, which is really exciting. The key player for Delhi Capitals that I'm always interested in how she's going to go is Shafali Verma. Now, she was massive in terms of franchise picks, and she got picked up in the WBBL, and she got picked up in the kind of the 100, the first year of the 100. So she kind of shot off the blocks and has had a bit of a little bit like Izzy Wong. She's such an aggressive player that she has kind of struggled for consistency sometimes. And that has led to her being dropped by the India squad. So it's interesting to see her actually then come into this tournament, not with an Indian kind of being dropped from the India squad, and has just gone really aggressive. Her and Meg Lanning kind of really go well together. Meg Lanning, that cool senior head and pretty consistent in her run scoring. Shafali Verma comes out and absolutely terrifies bowling attacks. So I'm excited to see her play. And we go on about this Delhi Capitals team. Jess Jonathan has batted really well for kind of a bowling all-rounder. She's kind of averaging around the 40s. So she's been an exciting talent. And so Welsh Fire will be excited to see that. And then you have the kind of exciting talent of Annabelle Sutherland, who I think if you're looking at a player to watch in the women's 100 this year, Annabelle Sutherland is going from strength to strength in her international and domestic career. She's just taking off, and you can't count Marizanne Kapp out of it. So really, tomorrow's final will be a real kind of tussle. So I'm excited that I'm off work and I'm going to be able to stick on and kind of really digest the whole event.
Good. Who do we reckon wins then? Mumbai or Delhi? Who would your money be on?
Real tough because both of them are just incredible teams. I think that Delhi are not going to make it again because I just think this Mumbai team coming off I think there's an incredible. I wish I'd looked at this before this podcast, but teams going through a playoff and then going into the final. When it happens in the 100, a lot of the times when a team has had to go through the playoffs, they come into the actual final pretty kind of hot and pretty kind of excited to play. So I think it's like sometimes that can really kind of get you actually win a massive semi-final, then you kind of straight into the final and you just kind of riding that wave. So I think Delhi have got to find a way to staunch that, but I think Mumbai just might make it 2 wins from the third kind of WPL.
Yeah, no, I could see Mumbai winning it as well. I think that their firepower just might be a little bit too much. They are slight favourites in the betting odds at the moment. But it is very close. Delhi Capitals 10 to 11, Mumbai 4 to 5. When are we going to see an expansion of the WPL? Can we see it happening soon? I know that the Rajasthan Royals owner did an interview not long ago saying that they were in for a WPL side when it originally came up. They didn't get one, but we're on that list of when it starts to expand. So I wonder what will happen. Do we go up to 6, 8 teams? What do we do?
I think it's making sure that the Indian domestic talent has got the structure right as well. And I think that's where India were a bit lacking in the. Now England had by no stretch of the imagination nailed it with its domestic system versus Australia. And so kind of Australia had that state contracts, state system just running like an absolute machine for the last kind of 10 plus years. So every women's domestic system is catching up at that. Whether the Indian kind of domestic talent, it's definitely coming through. And I think if you look back, as I said, there's been some incredible domestic performances. Whether that talent pool is still a little bit shallow, I think you probably could add it to. I think you probably could add it to two more franchises, and then it wouldn't be too diluted. I think if you're pushing it up to maybe 8, you might be struggling a little bit. And if you're still keeping that kind of not that many overseas, if you get what I mean. So I think it'll be interesting to see, but I'd love to see it. I think a Rajasthan team would be really good. I think they're kind of just as a kind of franchise, I think they would be kind of really interested to invest in a WPL franchise. I think they probably missed out a little bit by not kind of nailing that bid in the kind of when it kind of obviously was at the start, but I think there probably was kind of a lot of interest and those teams got like snapped up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of money being thrown around when the WPL teams come up, but it has been really exciting. And because there is only 3 big franchise competition for the women, the women's 100, the WBBL, and the WPL. It's always exciting to see the best players playing in one competition. Whereas you look at the men's game and someone's off playing in the Cayman Islands, and you've got someone else playing in Guyana, another one playing in Dubai. And I'm glad that the women's game hasn't quite got to that point and it doesn't dilute itself too much. That's always fun to see. Other news, Harry Brook banned for 2 years from the IPL. For me, seems like a mistake. I completely understood. His nan passed away last year. He decided to pull out of the Test series versus India and then didn't go to the IPL. Absolutely no problems with that. I think the IPL was relatively upset with him pulling out because they'd obviously bought him in the auction. And wanted him to play, and I think that he was probably one of the reasons that this new rule came in of if you put your name into the auction and you then pull out before the start of the tournament, you will be banned for 2 years. Well, the BCCI have kind of stepped up and said he can't play until 2028 now. I think he's going to miss that experience of being able to play. It's the best franchise competition in the world, and him missing out on something like that just seems like a bit of a mistake. What do you reckon?
I think it's an interesting, it pretty clearly points where you kind of stand on your kind of allegiances a bit. And I think seeing some fan reactions, obviously some people are very excited for him to just be playing championship cricket, and then that being he will not be able to have that opportunity for so now this year. So is it 2 more years after this year then? Yeah.
So he can. He obviously he's not going to play in this year. He'll be banned from 26, 27, and then he can play again in 28 when he's 29 years old at that point.
Looking at this, the Wisdom Cricket Podcast did a list of all the events that Harry Brooks had played in, and Harry Brooks had played in, and coming up to, and then if he had played in this auction. Now, I'm not saying anything, but it's kind of, was this avoidable? Like, didn't someone, and I remember Kevin Peterson was very vocal about how he was mismanaged when he just wanted to go play in the IPL. And now his comment kind of a couple of years ago was now every schedule is managed and stuff. Was this avoidable? Did Harry Brooks need to be in the auction at the first point? Did he? I think it just seems like a bit of an interesting decision that just a bit of planning could have kind of, if someone had sat down with Harry Brooks and said, right, you've got this massive spell. You're one of our multi-format players. You've got this massive spell of games. You've got like Champions Trophy. You've got a really big, coming up to a big Ashes. Do you think your bandwidth is enough to be in the kind of the big franchise tournament? And do we need to maybe manage you a bit better in the kind of the run up to that? Like, do you miss a series here and there? So I just think it seems like a massive mismanagement. And I think surely that we kind of are forward thinking, and these things are pretty set in stone to know when kind of players and stuff. So I think it's now, if we're talking burnout, if we're talking last year because a family member died, 100% like miss for those reasons. But I just don't see the need to enter yourself into an auction and then not have someone in your team or someone in your management structure to not evaluate or someone in the England setup to not evaluate if you're going to be able to have the bandwidth for that tournament, because it is the biggest franchise tournament. And as we said, the experience, and I think the experience of playing in that tournament is massive. I think some people don't, for some reason, still don't seem to think that's a value of playing in the biggest franchise tournament in the subcontinent conditions, where we're going to be playing a T20 tournament in a year's time. So I think that is still a massive value piece. I think the exciting thing to think about is who's going to replace him in that Delhi Capitals team.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I saw a rumor, and I cannot remember off the top of my head who it was going to be. And it has completely lost me because I
Brevis,
saw
maybe?
possibly. I thought it was someone English.
Oh, okay. That was not the rumor mill that I've heard. The rumor mill I've heard is that Brevis has been playing very good domestic South African 50 over cricket. Had a very good Mumbai MI Cape Town season, and that was my pick. I didn't hear it. So I haven't heard of rumor mill. I'm interested now to think who the English player could have been.
I can't remember who it was.
Oh,
Genuinely cannot remember who it was, and it will. I've completely lost it. But Brevis would be a really good pick. That's probably who I would go for. I mean, in terms of him putting his name into the auction, I think he was, because they then had the rule in this auction that if you put your name into this auction, you couldn't go into the next auction. I think that was the issue. Because
that was the reason Archer did it, didn't he? Actually,
yes,
it's a fair point. I completely think of that.
Yeah, but the problem is that we would have been in exactly the same position this year. If anything, it would have been even worse because, okay, so what would have happened is he would have been in Australia from the middle of November, probably the start of November. Actually, there's a white ball tour before the Ashes, so he would have gone on the white ball tour to New Zealand in October. Would have been away from October into November for the Ashes, December, start of January, home for a couple of weeks, back out to India, T20 World Cup, and then it would have been the IPL again. So you either just say, I can't play the IPL, which is absolutely fine. We've seen cricketers throughout the years, and I do think he's very similar. So Harmison said on the TalkSport podcast that he just gets homesick, and you could not pay him any amount of money to go sit in India for 2 months. And there's a lot of travel in the IPL. It's a lot of hotels, and you can't really go out because people are nuts about cricket there. And so I kind of get it. And if he's happy with that, then he shouldn't play in the IPL, and this 2-year ban isn't going to be a massive issue for him. The cricketing issue that I have is that Harry Brook's biggest problem is that he cannot play spin. Medium pace stuff in April and May in Yorkshire, he has absolutely no problem with. Spin in the subcontinent, even if you're going to be playing on the flattest roads in India, you can still go out, find 4 net bowlers that are going to bowl mystery spin at you for 3 hours. And that is going to improve how you play. Also, one thing was that Peterson was meant to be part of the Delhi Capital setup. I think him and Peterson would have done very well together, and Peterson could have given him a lot of tips and could have grown his game. I think he's going to miss out on that massively. That's where I have an issue from a cricketing perspective. I have no problem with him pulling out. If he's feeling burnt out, if he feels like he can't do it, you should take your mental health more important than money. And because if you fall out of loving cricket in 6 months and you never play cricket again, I'd rather you pulled out the IPL and didn't play for it for 2 years, even if it means that you can't play spin. Then it is what it is. But just from a cricketing perspective, I would have liked Harry Brook to play in the IPL.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all those points, really.
And we have been going on for far too long. We should probably wrap the podcast up.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for listening. If you do want to check out Andrew, go and check out his stuff. Andrew, do you want to give yourself a plug?
Yes, anything colourblind cricket or across all kind of, I'm trying to, YouTube is in the plans, but mainly it's on TikTok and Instagram at the moment.
You should check it out. They are really, really good videos, always in depth, and knows, especially for women's cricket. If you want to go anywhere for women's cricket, there is not many too knowledgeable people in the space. So go and check out Andrew. He's incredible in what he does. Thank you very much for listening, watching, wherever you get your podcast. Remember to leave us a like, subscribe, follow, leave a rating, a review, all the usual stuff. And we will probably be back next week for an IPL preview. I think we're starting to get to that point now.
That point of the year.
Not a lot of cricket. We've got 2 months in India to enjoy. So we'll be building up to that. So the next podcast will probably be next week. But thank you very much for listening. If you did make it this far, I will see you guys in the next one.